Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf Pei Bet. We are going to finish dealing with the end part of our Mishnah. So the first part we're going to start with today is Hilvau ala mashkon shomer sachal. We're talking about someone, and we're starting from the bottom of Pei Aleph Amud Bet, about 6 or 7 lines from the bottom. We're going to talk about a case where somebody loans, okay, I loaned you money and I took collateral. What level of responsibility do I have toward this collateral? Okay, basic question. According to the Mishnah, we said I'm a shomer sachal. Now it's a little bit strange. I didn't get paid. I didn't get anything for this. To which the the Mishnah had explained, or the Mishnah really didn't explain. Let's go back to the Mishnah for a minute because there's a machloket in the Mishnah. The first opinion in the Mishnah is shomer sachal. And we said then that the reason why I'm a shomer sachal here, where I'm getting paid, is because I'm getting rewarded for doing a mitzvah. Okay, what's the reward for doing a mitzvah? Perhaps it's what we call pruta de Rav Yosef, which we've seen before, which is the fact that I don't need to answer the door now. If someone knocks at my door and asks for charity, I gain from that. Okay, perhaps that's one way to look at it. Or perhaps I gain because I did a mitzvah by loaning you money. There's a whole machloket, if you remember, about if I'm gaining benefit because I don't have to give a poor person money at the door, when am I exempt? When I'm dealing with your mashkon, let's say it's a rug and I have to shake it out. We had that all in Sukkah. If you remember, like a shomer aveda, it's the same kind of thing. I'm watching your lost item. And while I'm busy dealing with it, so, it doesn't get moldy or something smelly, I have to shake it out every once in a while. And then at that moment, someone comes to my door. That's Tosfot. But the Ran said, as long as I have it in my house, I'm doing a mitzvah, right? I'm watching your lost item. I've given you a loan and now have collateral. That in itself puts me in a place of you're just always involved in a mitzvah and then you're exempt from another mitzvah. That's a whole interesting machloket, but not really for today. So that's Bava Kamma. Rabbi Yehuda says no. It really depends what kind of loan it is. If I loaned you money, there's no real benefit for me. First of all, I benefited you, not I didn't benefit from it. But if I loaned you fruit, I actually benefited. And then I'm a shomer sachal. Why? Because if I didn't loan you my fruit, I would have had too much fruit and it would have rotted and I would have thrown it out. Here I got to do something useful with my fruit, which is loaned it out to someone, and then you'll pay me back either the value or the fruit, right? Remember, you can't loan fruit for fruit, but there are certain circumstances right? Yeshlo, all that. I'm not going to get into all that. But if I loaned you fruit, then I actually benefited because then my fruit didn't rot and I'm able to get back fresh fruit later or the value of it later. So that was a benefit to me. That's Rabbi Yehuda, who disagrees with Bava Kamma, although we are going to suggest possibly today that maybe there's really no disagreement, and Bava Kamma is Rabbi Yehuda, and we'll see that in a bit. So the question really of the Gemara is going to start off, and when we get to the end of the sugya, we're going to think the question was a little bit strange. But the Gemara starts off right now, it seems like a reasonable question. Lema manitin to loke Rabbi Eliezer. Is it possible our Mishnah doesn't hold like Rabbi Eliezer? Now, who's Rabbi Elazar and why? And what is Rabbi Eliezer? Well, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with Rabbi Akiva about a mashkon in general. What we're going to do is today, for the first part of today's class, which is going to get us already to Amud Bet, we're going to say, number one, is possible our Mishnah could be explained like Rabbi Eliezer, and we're going to give 2 possible explanations. Then we're going to actually say, no, we'd rather say the Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, and therefore they reject everything we did. Then they're going to bring 4 possibilities to understanding in what exact case do Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva disagree, and what's the machloket between them. Okay, what's the basis of the machloket, of the disagreement? But right now we're going to understand it in a particular way, which later we're going to suggest maybe that's not exactly the way to understand the machloket. Ditanya, here's the machloket. Hamavet chavero ala mashkon. So we're at the bottom of Pei Aleph Amud Bet. You loan a friend money, and they give you a collateral. Va'avad hamashkon, and you lose that collateral. This is exactly our Mishnah. What's the level of responsibility? Yishava v'yitol ma'otav divrei Rabbi Eliezer. You take an oath, and then you don't have to write. You lost the item. That's classic aveda, and you can go get your money back for the loan. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer obviously views the malveh ala mashkon as shomer chinam, because a shomer sachar would have to pay for it getting lost. And this he views as a shomer chinam, which seems to go against our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says shomer sachar. Now the assumption is that why does Rabbi Eliezer think this way? because you're not gaining any benefit from having this collateral. Why do you have the collateral? It's what we call lizichron dvarim. It's just to remember that there's a loan here, okay? But if I want some sort of proof that we had a loan, so I take a collateral, and that, right, when you claim, oh, there was no loan, I say, well, then what am I doing with your watch? Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yachol lomar lo, klum hilvitani el ala mashkon, avad mashkon of dumaotecha. Rabbi Akiva says, I could say to you, the lobe, after I lose your mashkon, you gave me your watch for this loan, and I lost it. You could say to me, hey, I only gave you this mashkon so that, right, you gave me a loan and I gave you the collateral. What was the collateral if not to start collecting for the loan? And therefore, avana mashkon of dumaotecha. You say I gave you this item to collect the loan from. In the event that you default on the loan, I keep the watch. So since that's the case, well, you lost the watch. Tough luck, you don't get your money back. And then we say that's because it's not that the collateral was just to have a proof that there was a loan. The collateral is actually to pay back the loan, right? It's the starting of paying it back, which means what? How does that fit in? Why can we say, let's say it's not worth the value, although we'll get into a discussion. Is it specifically the machloka when it is worth the value, when it's less than the value? But the point is, what's my level of responsibility for this mashkon? I'm a shomer tzachal. It's as if I'm getting paid. Why? Because you gave me the collateral as if you were paying me, right? It's like a payment. I'm benefiting from it. Why am I benefiting? Because the hardest part about any kind of business is collecting, right? To collect from the other. If I already have the mashkon in my hand, it's as if it's collected. So I benefit from that. If I benefit from that, well, then I'm liable for avedah. So that means I have to pay you back, which means basically the loan is canceled. So the simple reading of our Mishnah, the Tuvau ala mashkon shomer sachal, sounds much more like Rabbi Akiva than Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara struggles with that and says, is it really true it's not like Rabbi Eliezer? And now they're going to attempt to, so there's one more part of this braita. Aval, but by the way, this machloket, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, is not in the following case. Hilvau elef zuz b'shtal, v'iniach lo mashkon alehem, divrei hakol avana mashkon avdu ma'utav. If I loaned you 1,000 zuz, with a shtar, with a document. And what did Rabbi Eliezer say, the way we understood it? That it's all about zichron dvarim. It's just so that I have a record. Well, what's the record? The record is that I have a collateral in my hand. What else would I be doing with it if we didn't have a loan? But if I had a shtar, if we wrote down that you owe me money, I don't need the mashkon for that purpose because I have a document, which is even stronger. So therefore, if there was already a document and hiniach mashkon, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree in that case that the mashkon is actually for purposes of collection. As soon as it goes into purposes of collection, then I'm benefiting, then I become a shomer tzachal, someone who's getting paid. Again, it's not really getting paid, but I'm getting benefit because I'm getting benefit. Therefore, I'm a shomer tzachal. And then I'd be obligated, right? If I lost it, I'd have to pay, which means in this case, I won't get my money back. So now the Gemara says, Afilu tema Rabbi Eliezer, v'lo kasha, kan shemishkeno b'shat hava'ato, kan shemishkeno shelo b'shat hava'ato. We're now going to talk about two kinds of mashkons. Until now, we said that Rabbi Eliezer holds the mashkon is just to remember, right? To write things down. So it's as if writing things down. It's a way to have a record that there was a loan. But it really depends on when the mashkon was taken. That's if the mashkon was taken at the moment we took the loan. Because when do I want to have a record? At the moment of taking the loan. So if I took the collateral at the beginning, that's when Rabbi Eliezer is that's the bright time. That's when Rabbi Eliezer says, in this case, it's just lizichron dvarim, it's just to have some sort of proof that there was a loan, which means I'm not really benefiting from it because I can't really collect from this. This isn't for collection purposes, so it's not benefit. If it's not benefit, I'm shomer chinam, basically like watching something for free. But the Mishnah, we can explain even according to Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer would agree in a different case that I'm a shomer tzachal. Why is that? In a case where hilvau shelo b'shat, mishkeno shelo b'shat havato, I took the mashkon later. What does later mean? later means that I went to collect the loan. You refused to pay me back. So the court comes in and seizes your property and gives it to me as collateral. Now, what is that if not for collection purposes? That's exactly collection. Then the mashkom for me is sachar in that point. I'm benefiting from the fact that I have this collateral. Again, I'm benefiting when I have it lizakron dvarim also, but it's not a monetary benefit really. But when I'm getting it, basically the court's saying, listen, I'm seizing, right? We're seizing your watch. And in the event that you don't get your money back, we're going to keep trying to get your money. But if we don't succeed, this watch is for collection purposes. Well, then that's as if I got money, and as if therefore my level of responsibility, again, until I return it, if you provide me with the money and I no longer have that collateral, then I have to pay you back because I was a shomer tzachar. So that's how we can rectify the Mishnah, reconcile the Mishnah with Rabbi Eliezer, because we can distinguish and say the Mishnah was talking about a different case. The Mishnah was talking about a case where it says there's shomer tzachar when it was not at the time of the loan. When it was at the time of the loan, of course, it was just l'zikron dvarim, and there Rabbi Eliezer would say what Rabbi Eliezer says. But Rabbi Eliezer would agree with Rabbi Akiva in the other case. But there's a bit of a problem with that because the language of the Mishnah doesn't match that at all. Both the Braita, which anyway we explained that way, but also the Mishnah uses the language hilvau al hamashkon katani. Hilvau al hamashkon means you loan someone with a collateral. It doesn't mean you loan them and later took a collateral. It means at the time of the loan, you took an object for collateral. So it seems like you can't explain the Mishnah fitting with Rabbi Eliezer according to this explanation. So attempt number 2, to explain the Mishnah according to Rabbi Eliezer. Elalo kasha. Kan shovau ma'ot, kan shovau pirot. The distinction we said before. It depends what you loaned. If you loaned fruits, then you're benefiting as the lender. And therefore, you're going to be a shomer sachar. And that's what the Mishnah was talking about. But if it was ma'ot, that's what Rabbi Elazar and the Braita was talking about, where you loan money and took collateral, there was no benefit. Because you just did a favor for the other person. You didn't gain anything from giving your money away. It's actually bad for you. You don't have your money. But it's a bit of a problem. You remember the Mishnah? That's why I started with it. To say that the line is only perot makes no sense. Because what does the Mishnah say again? Let's go back. Hilvau ala mashkon is on daf pei amabed, shomer sachar. Rabbi Yehuda says it all depends whether it's ma'ot or perot. So the Gemara is going to say, Hami dekatani seifa Rabbi Yehuda omer hilvau ma'ot shomer chinam hilvau perot shomer sachar. Michlal de Tana Kamma lo shanele. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda makes that distinction and Tana Kamma doesn't seems to make it very clear that Tana Kamma doesn't think it depends on money or fruit. And no matter what, you're a shomer sachar. In which case, you can't explain Rabbi Eliezer in that way. But the Gemara says, no, perhaps you can read, and we had this not so long ago with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in a Braita, where we thought he was disagreeing with Tana Kamma. In the end, we said, actually, it's all one opinion, and it's just missing some transition words. And here it goes. Kula Rabbi Yehuda v'chisur machasra v'achi katani. You could say that both Tana Kamma that we thought was Tana Kamma, that line, and Rabbi Yehuda, really, it's not Tana Kamma Rabbi Yehuda. It's all Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And this is how you read the Mishnah. Hilvau ala mashkon shomer sachar. Simply says, right, you loan someone with a collateral, you're a shomer sachar. B'meh dvarim amurim, but wait, in which case is this referring to? Shuvau perot. Only if you loaned fruits, then you're benefiting. And this, by the way, will resolve our problem with, what do you mean a shomer sachar? Because you're getting benefit of a mitzvah. That's how we explained Tana Kamma before, right? That maybe there's some benefit of a mitzvah or something, that you don't have to answer the door for a poor person and give them money at the door. That's a bit of a weak answer, right? We don't usually call sachar reward. I mean, we do call doing mitzvah getting rewards, but not in the context of this kind of conversation of a shomer sachar. And then we neutralize that position entirely. Because we say the whole sachar that we're talking about is this sachar of having loaned someone fruits, that you're actually benefiting from having given them a loan. Usually it's the borrower who's benefiting, but in the case of fruits, you're actually benefiting also by loaning out the fruits. Because again, when you loan the fruits, you'll get back the value of them later rather than your fruits rotting and going in the garbage. And here comes the transition. Rabbi Yehuda omer, because Rabbi Yehuda actually has this distinction. In other words, the Mishnah quotes a simple halakha, but then qualifies it and says, that, again, this is a rereading of the Mishnah. It doesn't say this in the Mishnah, but we're saying as if the Mishnah reads like this. We have this blanket halakha, but it's not actually a blanket halakha. It's not in every case. It's only in the fruit case. And how do we know? Because Rabbi Yehuda makes that distinction. And then everyone agrees with it. We're just quoting Rabbi Yehuda because he's the one who happened to make that distinction. So Rabbi Yehuda had said, and then Rabbi Eliezer could fit perfectly with the Mishnah, because Rabbi Eliezer and the Braita was talking about a regular loan of money. There you're shomer chinam because you're not benefiting. In our Mishnah, it was talking about you lent fruits and there was benefit, and that's why you're shomer sachar. That's a pretty good answer. How? Well, weak because you have to reread the Mishnah, but it could work. And now, I told you in the beginning, it was a bit of a strange question. Well, or it's going to look like a strange question. In the beginning, it looked like a pretty legit question. Oh, does the Mishnah really not match Rabbi Elazar? We do this all the time. We say, oh, there's some machloket. This opinion doesn't seem to fit with our Mishnah. So now we struggled till we figured out finally after two attempts, right? The second attempt, we were successful in trying to figure out a way to explain Rabbi Eliezer according to our Mishnah, or explain our Mishnah according to Rabbi Eliezer. But what happens then? So Rabbi Akiva, who disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer in the Braita, would say, even if it's money, you're a shomer sachar, which means that our Mishnah doesn't go like Rabbi Akiva, the way we just explained it. Well, ihachi kamalamaниtin deloka Rabbi Akiva. But then our Mishnah doesn't follow Rabbi Akiva, which is a big problem. Now, why is that such a big problem? Well, Rashi explains, if you look in Rashi, the second line in Rashi, ihachi kamalamanitin deloka Rabbi Akiva. Why? Well, we already know. The Katani avalim aval ma'ot shomer chinam, right? The Mishnah basically reads as if it's money you loaned, you're a shomer chinam. And Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree with that, because the Braita where he disagrees and says no matter what, you're a shomer sachar, was in the money case. And Anakaimalam is Sanhedrin. Now, why do we care that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva? Because in Sanhedrin it says, Bekulu stame, these are the rules. When you have a stam, an unattributed opinion in a Mishnah, stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, we assume it's Rabbi Meir, that's famous, we've said that many times. Stam Sifra Rabbi Yehuda. If it's a Midrash halakha and Sefer Vayikra, we assume it's Rabbi Yehuda. We attribute an anonymous opinion to Rabbi Yehuda. Stam Sifre Rabbi Shimon. If it's a Midrash halakha and Bamidbar and Dvarim, we assume it's Rabbi Shimon. And Kulu Aliva de Rabbi Akiva. All three of these were the students of Rabbi Akiva, including Rabbi Meir. So if a Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, who goes in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, then why would we ever try to explain a Mishnah against Rabbi Akiva? So even though we somehow found a way to explain the Mishnah according to Rabbi Eliezer, in the end, if we have a choice, let's read the Mishnah the simple way, and it accords with Rabbi Akiva, we'd rather have it accord with Rabbi Akiva than Rabbi Eliezer. So we don't have any reason to think that the Stam Mishnah should be Rabbi Eliezer. In which case, the Gemara says, so after we bend over backwards to try to explain the Mishnah according to Rabbi Eliezer, they say, there's no reason to do that. I'd rather say that the Mishnah accords with Rabbi Akiva because that fits in with our general perception of who these unattributed opinions in the Mishnah are, which raises the question, and I don't have an answer for it, why the student started out saying, could it be the Mishnah is not Rabbi Eliezer? Well, of course it could be, and why would you even think there's a problem, right? So it's a little bit strange, and I don't have an answer to that question, why we even started with Rabbi Eliezer and trying to explain it according to Rabbi Eliezer. But since we brought up this machloket, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, we now want to try to understand it better. So right now we think the basis of the Mishnah, the machloket is, right, if you lent money on collateral, are you gaining benefit from this, right, or are you not? And perhaps the benefit is the mitzvah issue, perhaps it's not, we don't know exactly. So now we're going to have 4 possible explanations, although many of them are going to be rejected, as to what the machloket is between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Lema b'delo shave mashkon shiur zuzin. We didn't talk about this before. Is this collateral we're talking about worth the value of the loan or not worth the value of the loan? So the first explanation is going to be, maybe the whole machloket is when it's not worth the value of the loan. I took a watch that's worth 200 zuz, and the loan was 1,000 zuz. Okay, and now, bidish shmuel kamifligin. Now remember the machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says, if I lose that watch, so I take an oath, right? He says, if I lose that watch, yishavav yitoma otav. I take an oath that I lost it, and I still collect the 1,000 zuz. According to Rabbi Akiva, I lost all my money. Now, this is a little strange. I had a watch worth 200. I lose it. I lose all my money. Well, in fact, we could say that the machloket is based on whether they accept what Shmuel says or not. Now, neither of them lived in the time of Shmuel. They lived before Shmuel. But what we're suggesting is that perhaps what Shmuel said later was actually the source of debate between them, between these Tanaim, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. So let's see what it is. The Amar Shmuel, Haiman de Osfe Alpha Zuze L'Chavre. Someone loaned 1,000 zuz to his friend. And he gave him the handle of a sickle, which is obviously not even worth close to 1,000 zuz. Avad kata de magla, avdu alpha zuze. Shmuel said this crazy thing. If you lose that collateral, you lose your whole loan. You lose all your money. So that's the first suggestion. Now, why would you possibly lose all your money? So if you look in the end of the Rashi on B'delo Shavei Shiur Zuze Kamiflage, B'Shmuel Kamiflage, B'Shmuel Plige, it's toward the end. Rabbi Akiva Itle de Shmuel, he says there. Mine has like a semicolon, and then it says Rabbi Akiva Itle de Shmuel. Maybe you don't have, maybe it doesn't appear by you. But anyway, Amar Savir Rekabil B'Torat Mashkon, B'Kol Kama Delo Mahadrele Lo Likbe. The whole purpose of a mashkon is saying, when you give me back the mashkon, I'll give you the money. If you don't return the mashkon, I don't have to give you the money. That's what Shmuel holds. And then we can assume that Rabbi Akiva holds the same. And that's what Rabbi Akiva says. You lost the mashkon. The fact that it was worth less doesn't matter. No matter what, you lost your money. And Shmuel said, and that's like Shmuel. Rabbi Eliezer will say, what are you talking about? That was worth nothing near, right? That doesn't allow you to get away with not paying back the money at all. Of course, you still have to pay me back the money. Okay, and perhaps that's the machloket between them. But considering Shmuel is a bit of an out there opinion, the Gemara is now going to say, no, that's not the case. No. We could say if it's not worth the amount of the loan, okay, this is rejecting the first possible explanation of their machloket. If they don't disagree about whether they agree with Shmuel or disagree with Shmuel. Again, remember, Shmuel didn't exist then, but this statement Shmuel made. But if it's not worth, it's worth 10 zuz and the loan's 1,000 zuz, of course that's not going to work. Even if it's worth 500 zuz and the loan's 1,000 zuz. You lose it, you don't not pay anything back. De kule ama leit lehu de Shmuel. Okay, by the way, Rashi says here, kule ama leit lehu de Shmuel, nobody agrees with Shmuel, so what will we say? Rabbi Eliezer lo mafsi klum. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer said you lose the mashkon, it doesn't matter. You just take an oath and you get all your money back. Le Rabbi Akiva, what are you going to lose? Eino mafsida ela keneged hamashkon. If it was 200 zuz, then you won't get back 200 zuz, but of course you'll get your 800 zuz back. We're not going to go that far. Now, Shmuel went that far, but we're going to say no. Neither Rabbi Eliezer nor Rabbi Akiva thought that. So if so, then what's the machloket? Hacha b'deshavei shiur zuza. The machloket is if the collateral was actually worth the value of the loan. It was the exact amount. I took a collateral worth 1,000 zuz. And then the machloket is whether or not they accept what Rabbi Yitzchak said. Also a later commentary who we're going to say, right, also he was an Amorach, and we're going to say, did they accept this statement or not? Again, not that they saw his statement, but the question is that the machloket? The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, right? We're taking a later machloket and kind of supplanting it or saying that must have been something the Tanaim were also thinking about, even though they didn't express it in those same words. What does Rabbi Yitzchak say? How do we know that when you're owed money and you take collateral for it, you actually acquire the mashkon? It becomes yours. Shenema ulecha tiet staka. This is a pasuk about a mashkon, and it says if you take a mashkon, let's say you take a blanket of a poor person, you have to return it every night. And when you return it every night, it says ulecha tiet staka, and this will be seen as a very righteous deed. Well, comes Rabbi Yitzchak and he says, and we've seen this opinion before a bunch of times, if it's his and you're just returning it, then why is this called staka? It must be that you own it, and yet you have a responsibility to return it every night. From here we learn that you actually acquire the rights to the mashkon. So now, if you acquire the rights to the mashkon, right, then you acquire rights to the mashkon, comes Rabbi Akiva and says the mashkon is yours. If the mashkon is yours, if it gets lost, you lose your money, basically. okay? Because you owned it already. That was as if you got your loan back. And if you lose it, tough luck on you, right? It's as if they paid you back and you lost the money they paid you back, right? If someone gives you the money back for the loan and a minute later you lose it, you can't claim, oh, I lost it, give me more money. So that's the way he views this mashkon. Since you're kona the mashkon, it's yours. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't agree with this approach, doesn't think that you're kona the mashkon. The mashkon is the loves. So if it gets lost, the loves, the borrower's item got lost. Okay, what's the difference? You still get your money back. And that's the machloket, according to option 2. So option 1 was, do they argue about Shmuel in a case where it's not worth the value? And do you anyway lose all your money? We said, no, nobody agrees with that. Maybe it's when it's the exact value. And the question is the mashkon basically yours? And therefore you lose it, tough luck, or is it not considered yours? To which they say, v'tizbira, you really think so? Rabbi Yitzchak, when Rabbi Yitzchak said your kona mashkon, it wasn't in our case of malva ala mashkon, that you took the mashkon at the beginning of the loan. B'mishkano shelo b'shat havato, Rabbi Yitzchak b'mishkano shelo b'shat havato. He was talking about when do you acquire the mashkon? In the second case, when the lova didn't pay, you go to court, the court rules the borrower has to pay. They go seize property or something, an item of the borrowers, and give it to you in exchange for payment, right? And say, listen, this is yours until they actually pay you up. And if they don't, until they pay you. If they don't pay you, that's what Rabbi Yitzchak holds. You acquire the mashkon, not in the first case. In which case, right? And remember, we said the machloket is mishkano b'sha'at havato. That's what it said. Loveu ala mashkon. You took a loan with the mashkon. So you can't say that's the machloket. Ella mishkano b'shalo b'sha'at havato. If you take the mashkon later, actually, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that you acquire the mashkon. And therefore, that's not the machloket. The hacha, option number 3. B'mishkeno, it's very interesting. They can't really figure out what the machloket is between them. B'mishkeno b'sha'at havato. So it must be, you took the mashkon from the beginning, which is how we understood it in the first place. Ub'shomer aveda kamiflage. Now we go back to the shomer aveda and this pruta de Rabbi Yosef. Again, why is it called pruta de Rabbi Yosef? Because Rabbi Yosef says, the fact that you're not having to give a pruta at the door, right? That means you're already gaining benefit from having this item in your possession, which puts you at the level of a shomer, sachal. So now they're going to say the following. This is their machloket. Ub'shomer aveda kamiflage. Their machloket is exactly the same machloket as Rab and Rabbi Yosef have. Again, we're supplanting machloket amoraim on tanaim and saying that it's the exact same machloket that Rabba and Rabbi Yosef have about someone who's watching a lost item. Rabba omer deitmar, as it was said, shomer aveda. If you're watching someone's lost item, you pick it up on the street, you have to return it. In the meantime, you're watching it. Rabba amar kishomer chinam. You're watching something for free. So that's your level of responsibility. It gets stolen or lost, you're not responsible. Rabbi Yosef amar kishomer sachal. It's like you're getting paid because you don't have to give this pruta, this coin, to the poor person. That's as if you're getting paid because you're saving yourself something. And therefore you're a shomer sachal. And then we're going to say very simply, Rabbi Akiva, who says you're a shomer sachal when you're watching this mashkon, you're liable like a shomer sachar. It gets lost, you have to pay, right? Meaning you don't get your money back. That's because he holds like Rabbi Yosef. And Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabba. To which they don't really like this because they say, Lema de Rabbi Yosef Tanahi. You really think whether or not we accept Rabbi Yosef as a machloket Tanaim and that Rabbi Akiva holds like him and Rabbi Eliezer doesn't? They don't want to believe that for some reason. And therefore they say, lo, b'shomer aveda de kule ilu to Rabbi Yosef. Really? And maybe because that was the general opinion and nobody thought it was a Tanaitic machloket. I guess until this point, no one mentioned that maybe that's the machloket between them. So they didn't want to accept that. They said, no, actually everyone agrees with Rabbi Yosef in a shomer aveda case, that you're like a shomer sachar, even Rabbi Eliezer. But our case is something else. Fourth option, and this is the option that's going to be accepted, even though it's a little bit hard to understand. Turning out I'm a bet. B'milvet sarich lemashkon kabiflagin. I say it's hard to understand because Rashi, it's even hard to understand what this case is. Okay, we'll go with Rashi. Rashi says it's a case where the malvet uses the mashkon and benefits from it. What does that mean? It means that the malveh rents out the mashkon and deducts it from the loan. So now, mar saval mitzvah ka'avid shehoveu v'havi shomer sachar. So now they say, right, Rabbi Akiva says, even though the malveh gets benefit from the mashkon, really, he's doing it for the purposes of a mitzvah. The reason he gave the reason why he gave this loan was to give for a mitzvah purpose, okay? And the reason why he got the mashkon, right, it was all part of a mitzvah. And since he's doing a mitzvah, he's a shomer sachar because he's benefiting from a mitzvah. Umar savar, Rabbi Eliezer holds, lav mitzvah ka'avid shelaha na'atomit kavein. The mom is actually benefiting from the mashkon. That neutralizes the mitzvah element because he's getting personal benefit from it. Now, it's a little bit weird to call this personal benefit because he did give a loan to someone and he's using the mashkon only to deduct the value. And that's why some people think maybe using it means something else. But we're going to stick with Rashi anyway. And since that's the case, since there's personal benefit, we no longer consider you're getting benefit from a mitzvah. And therefore, havi shomer chinam. And therefore, you're considered a shomer chinam for this whole loan in general, because the benefit you get from the mashkon neutralizes the benefit of the mitzvah because it's personal benefit rather than mitzvah benefit. And therefore, we don't view you as, oh, you did this nice mitzvah, and therefore you're rewarded somehow. And since you're getting rewarded, we view you as a shomer sachar. No, you're a shomer chinam, and therefore you're not liable. Okay, that's in the end of machloket, which bit strange after all this. That's where we get to because it's a bit of a hard to understand opinion. And again, like I said, there's a big debate about how exactly to understand this because it's not so simple to understand. So what we did so far, and the structure is very simple, even though the content was a little bit more complicated, which is we had 2 attempts to try to explain our Mishnah, how it could fit with Rabbi Eliezer. The second attempt succeeded, but then was rejected entirely because that meant rejecting Rabbi Akiva. And then that meant, right, we'd rather, if we had a choice, we'd rather choose that the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Akiva. Then we have 4 different explanations, which again, all were rejected other than the last, to try to figure out what is the source of the debate, in which case do they argue, and what's the root of the debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. Now we're going to go back to our Mishnah. Abba Shaul omer, mutar la'adam laskir mashkono shalani liot pochet v'olech. If you take a mashkon from a poor person, and right, it's going to be hard for them to pay you back because they're so poor, then what do? You basically can rent out their item to other people and deduct it from the value of the loan, which is helpful to the poor person. But Amar Rav Chanan bar Ami Amar Shmuel halakha Abba Shaul. So it simply says we hold like Abba Shaul. But the Gemara is going to say, Abba Shaul Amar, we're now going to limit it a little bit. We're qualifying his statement. He didn't say this ela b'mara upasal v'kardon, a hoe, a chisel, and an axe. What's unique about a hoe, a chisel, and an axe? Didn't mean only for these 3 things, but something that's like these 3 items. Ho'il v'nafish igrayu v'zutar pachatayu. Because you can rent them out for a lot of money, and the depreciation is very minimal. So you're basically getting the most for your money, right? For the item of the poor person. You can't just choose to do it if you're not going to get them a lot of money or the depreciation is too much. If there's a lot of depreciation on the item or wear and tear, we don't want to basically allow you to rent that out because it seems, by the way, you're doing this without checking with the poor person. You're just assuming it's to their advantage. So when can you assume it's to their advantage? When there's not going to be a lot of wear and tear. There's going to be a lot of wear and tear, then you're not allowed to do it because it's not necessarily beneficial to the poor person. Okay, new Mishnah. Now we're switching topics entirely. You're taking someone's barrel. Someone asks you to move a barrel from one place to another, and you break it. So now we don't know you're getting paid or not. Bein shomer chinam, bein shomer sachar. It doesn't matter if you're getting paid or not getting paid for this job. Yishava. You take an oath that you tripped and fell and it wasn't your fault, right? I didn't do anything wrong. It just happened to break as I was moving it, right? These things happen and you're exempt. Rabbi Eliezer, or many people say it's Rabbi Elazar, Omer, Zeh v'zeh yishava. I agree with Bava Kamma, like this is the halakha. But tamei aniyim yicholim zeh v'zeh lishava. But I actually have a big problem with it. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, how can both of these people take an oath? We don't know yet what's bothering Rabbi Elazar. We'll have to wait for the Gemara to see. So the first thing the Gemara is going to do is quote a Braita, which is going to quote a third Tana. Okay, we had Bava Kamma and Rabbi Elazar in our Mishnah, even though both really said the same thing, although one took issue with the other without saying really what the problem was. In this Braita, we're going to have another opinion, Rabbi Yehuda. And we're going to see that Bava Kamma is Rabbi Meir, which fits with what we just said, that Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. So you move your friend's barrel. Here it's the exact same thing. The only difference is there it said you move a chavit. You didn't say it was someone else's, but it was obvious it was someone else's. This one says for your friend, and you broke it. Bein shomer chinam, again, friend doesn't necessarily mean your friend versus your enemy. It just means for somebody else, just a way of speaking. Bein shomer chinam, bein shomer sachar yishava, divrei Rabbi Meir. That's exactly what we saw in the Mishnah. Both of them are exempt. Rabbi Yehuda omer, shomer chinam yishava. If you're getting paid, then it's like, basically, this is no different from Gnevav Aveda. What's Gnevav Aveda? It's in between onus and negligence, right? You weren't negligent, then anyone would have to pay if they were negligent. Shomer Sachar, Shomer Chinam. They weren't onus, where both of them would be exempt. This is in between. This is like Gnevav Aveda, where Shomer Chinam, someone who watches for free, we don't make you pay for that. Because it happens and we don't really blame you fully for it. Shomer Sachar got paid. What did you get paid for if not to make sure this didn't happen? So if you paid someone to schlep your barrel, then you paid them. And if they tripped, they should have been super careful because they were getting paid for the job. If they were doing it for free, then we don't make them responsible. That's Rabbi Yehuda's approach. Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Elazar Omer, Zev v'zeh yishava v'tamei aniyim yicholim zev v'zeh yishava. It goes back to Rabbi Meir. Says they both take an oath and are exempt. Again, what did they take an oath? Saying, I didn't do it on purpose. And then they're exempt. But I don't really know why they can both take an oath. And again, we don't yet know why he says this. So the first thing the Gemara is going to say is deal with Rabbi Meir and a contradiction between Rabbi Meir says here and what we explained with Rabbi Meir in the beginning of Bava Kamma. You might remember this sugya. Rabbi Meir nitkal lav poshehu. Right here, we're talking about someone who trips and falls. We had a whole big machloket in Bava Kamma. If somebody trips and falls, do we blame them or do we not blame them? Right? You're a klutz. Is that your fault? You're a klutz, or is it not your fault? You're a klutz. So Rabbi Meir, you want to say now, according to our Mishnah, the Rabbi Meir is saying if you tripped and fell and the barrel broke, it's not your fault. It's an accident. That means nitkal is lav posheh. You're not considered negligent. But Hatanya, it said in a Braita that we quoted in Bava Kamma, Tav Kafchet, Nishbera kado v'lo silko, nafla gam lo v'lo hemida. Your cod broke. You might remember we had a lot of different explanations of this case. Your jug breaks and you didn't pick it up. Now, after a while, we assumed that what happened here? You tripped and fell and carrying a jug and the jug broke and you're still on the ground. You haven't gotten up yet and you haven't removed the pieces yet. Or perhaps it happened as you were falling and damaged something on its way down, or you didn't pick up the pieces because you didn't have enough time and damaged someone as a result, like somebody stepped on it and broke, got a cut. Nafla gam lo v'lo hemida. You were leading your donkey or camel, and you tripped and fell, and that also made the donkey trip and fall, and you didn't pick it up yet. And again, someone got damaged from that, either on the way down or after. Rabbi Meir mechayev behezekan. Rabbi Meir says you're liable. Why are you liable? Nitkal poshea. Okay? V'chachamim omrim patur midinei adam v'chayav b'dinei shamayim. Okay, you're exempt in laws of human courts, but when it comes to the courts in heaven, they'll punish you if need be. V'kain malan, and then we explain this machloket there. That b'nitkal poshea pligi. The whole machloket is how do we view someone who trips and falls? So Rabbi Meir there says you're obligated. Rabbi Meir here says you're not. Isn't it the same thing? To which Amar Rabbi Elazar, Tavra, Misha Shanazo, Lo Shanazo. Don't confuse Rabbi Elazar with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar in the Mishnah is a Tana. This is Rabbi Elazar the Amora, who's living in Israel, student of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elazar comes and says, don't worry, those two sources contradict each other. Very simple. That's one opinion of what Rabbi Meir held, and that's a different opinion of what Rabbi Meir held. There was a difference of opinion about what Rabbi Meir held about this issue. We have two different opinions about what he held. We have that many times, and that's the machloket here. Okay, this is a bit of a strange usage of Tavra. Often we have it in a Mishnah where we have two lines in a Mishnah, and then two parts of the Mishnah. One seems to follow one, and one seems to follow the other, and we say, don't worry, this is separate from that. Here we're taking two different sources, and saying they're both in the name of Rabbi Meir, but in fact, it's just two different approaches about what Rabbi Meir himself held. With that, we're done with Rabbi Meir. Now we want to move to Rabbi Yehuda, and then we'll get to Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Elazar, and we'll at least start to see today what his problems were. We'll see 2 out of 3. On to Rabbi Yehuda Lemeim. Rabbi Yehuda now says, shomer chinam yishava, no se sachar yishalem, hai kidine v'hai kidine. Okay, that's pretty simple the way he says it, but each one according to the laws that apply normally to a shomer chinam and a shomer sachar. Basically saying what I said before, which is, this is no different from gneva and avidah. Once you put it in the category of gneva and avidah, it's somewhere in between. You weren't negligent, but it also wasn't onus. It wasn't like you weren't at fault at all. You're somewhat at fault because you did trip. So we're going to put you in the middle. And then once it's in the middle category of gneva and avidah, it all depends. Did you get paid? If you got paid, you have to pay. If you didn't get paid, then we'll exempt you if you take an oath. The Ata Rabbi Eliezer Lemeim. Now, what's this Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Elazar's opinion? In Gemara ke Rabbi Meir. I do hold that the halakha is like Rabbi Meir because we have a tradition. We hold like Rabbi Meir on this issue. But right, this is just a quote of what he said. But I'm a little confused about how they can both take an oath. So now we're going to start with the first problem. And the first problem is only going to be with the shomer sachar. Bishlam shomer chinam mishtabeh. I get the shomer chinam. What does he take an oath saying? Okay, I wasn't negligent. It wasn't on purpose. I didn't purposely break the barrel. And then they're exempt because as long as it's not pshia, the shomer chinam is exempt. Ela shomer sachar, my mishtaba. What exactly is the shomer sachar going to take an oath about? Ki lo pasha. Okay, that I wasn't negligent about it. Well, nami shalume bai. Again, assuming. And he does assume that this is like gneva v'avedah. Now, gneva v'avedah, they can't take an oath and say, listen, I wasn't negligent and someone came and stole it from my house. They're still obligated. So what will it help to take an oath? The shomer sachar should be obligated anyway. Basically saying, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda seems to make a lot more sense. And afilu shomer chinam nami. And now we're going back to the shomer chinam, and he's going to have a question with that. And with this, we'll end because that's where our daf ends. Hatinach b'mkom midron. I get it if you were going down an incline, okay? You're going down an area where there's a big incline and you're taking the barrel, it's likely the barrel is going to break and that could be an accident. In other words, if you have no choice but to go down this hill and with the barrel, that's the only way to get there, then I get it. You could say, it wasn't my fault, it was an accident. But shelobim kol midron, if you're walking on flat ground and you trip and fall, how could you possibly take an oath and say it was an accident? What kind of accident happens by walking on a flat surface? No, you obviously must have done something wrong to cause it to happen. So how can a shomer chinam say it wasn't my fault at all? So that's where we're going to leave it. We have another question that's going to come up about even b'mkom midron. I still have a question. So to review the second part of today's daf, we started with, we finished with Abba Shaul and we qualified that it's only when there's a high. You can rent out an item if you get a high amount of rent and a low amount of small amount of depreciation. And then we move to this sort of 3-way machloket, even though it's really a 2-way machloket, but with a comment from the third opinion, the third approach here about the first opinion. But when you're carrying a barrel and it breaks, what level of responsibility do you assume? According to Rabbi Meir, you're not responsible at all, which contradicted what he said elsewhere, that it's kal is poshea. And we resolve that by saying there's 2 different approaches to what Rabbi Meir held. And then Rabbi Yehuda distinguished shomer chinam, shomer sachar, because basically viewed this as exactly like gneva and avidah. Once you put in that category, it just depends whether you're getting paid or not getting paid. And then we have Rabbi Elazar, who starts asking what difficulties he has with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. With that, we finished, and wishing everybody a good day and hoping for good news.